On this episode of Ideas, I talk with Chris Voss about his book, Never Split the Difference, a really good book. We discuss why empathy is many times misunderstood, how anyone can become a better negotiator, why compromising is rarely the best way forward, and much more. This episode is really actionable. We even talk about an email template. He has some tips around that converts 98% of the time. That being said, you can take a lot of these tips, apply them to your life, and instantly make things better. That's what I really liked about this episode. I hope you like it. All right, here we go. Today's guest is Chris Voss. He has 24 years of FBI experience and was the former FBI lead international kidnapping negotiator. He is also the founder of the Black Swan Group, a consulting firm that provides training and advises Fortune 500 companies through complex negotiations. And he's here today to talk about his bestseller, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Adam, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring you on just because your work is so interesting and it intrigues me, and found out about you through your book, and what a great book it is. I loved it. And I wanted to start off by asking you specifically about your story and why negotiation. There's so many routes that any of us can pick, and I can go back to my time in life and the different choices I made and going into business, and could have went 100 different routes, but went with business, and I believe life is a bunch of choices. So for you, and choosing a line of work, what do you think it was that maybe drove you to that line of work?
Well, I don't know. It's at the position I was in at the time. It sounded cool. Hostage negotiation, talking to terrorists, it sounded cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea of how pervasive it was in just every aspect of my life. I really overlooked it. We've got a saying, the most dangerous negotiation is one you don't know you're in. And but I had no idea how many negotiations I'm in on a daily basis, constantly, or that even that hostage negotiation was just emotional intelligence. But, back then I was in law enforcement. I was an FBI agent. Had been on the SWAT team. I loved crisis response because as a human being, I hate indecision, and crisis response calls for decision.
Sure.
You can't procrastinate in a hostage situation. Mm-hmm. Let's just think about this. Let's sleep on it. Come back to this tomorrow. You can't do that there.
Yeah.
So I love crisis response. I had a recurring knee injury, and I knew that eventually that I was going to blow my knee out, and I still wanted to stay in crisis response as an additional duty. Most law enforcement agencies, if you're a negotiator, it's an additional duty. So all right, I could do this. This will be an additional skill, and it'll be fun, it'll be satisfying, it'll be interesting. It was all those things, but that was why at the time I just wanted to stay in the game.
And you say that indecision drives you crazy, and it does me too. And it's so important for leaders to be able to make decisions. When you're consulting, I know that's a lot of what you do now, and you go and speak. Is that something that you talk on, getting leadership to make? Is it more making better decisions, making quicker decisions? What's your take on decision making in that realm?
Yeah, and it's in many cases, a decision is better than no decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't get data without making a decision and trying to trace back what happened as a result and why.
Sure.
It's almost a cliche, but Edison made 10,000 decisions on how to do a light bulb, and he got to the right decision. If he'd have sat back and said, I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, so I'm not going to try it, they wouldn't have figured out the light bulb. So it's not necessarily a good decision, but it's a decision. And a decision, data improves design, gives you data, and then you have an opportunity to get smarter.
That's good.
You have to factor in a little bit, the Colin Powell saying, never let your ego get so tied to a position that if the position collapses, your ego goes with it. What does that mean in terms of decision making? You're not betting your self-esteem that you made the right decision. And that's what stops people. They're afraid their self-esteem is going to collapse over the wrong decision, so they won't make a decision.
And what that reminds me of, that's a really good point, that we all need to make a decision at some point. We have to. Is the fear and anxiety that comes along with that. And as a negotiator, interrogation, I'm guessing you deal with fear and anxiety too. Have you found anything, any tips maybe to lessen fear and anxiety as you go into these? Have you found anything that has helped you personally cope with that? Or
Yeah, that is mankind's struggle, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's the
right.
essence of the existential struggle question since we were conscious is how do we deal with fear?
Hmm.
Like I got a couple different ways at different times, and I find for me personally, no one answer works all the time.
Okay.
And I had some anxiety over something recently, and I can't remember what caused it to clear up in a moment, but I remember saying to myself, and what I'm using a lot now is, nothing is worth being afraid of. Nothing has enough of a value that I should be afraid of it because my fear is going to debilitate me.
Hmm.
I know a good friend of mine, Eric Barker, writes a ridiculously phenomenal blog called Barking Up the Wrong Tree.
Yes.
It's got the book
Yes.
Barking
Great
Up
guy.
the Wrong Tree.
Yep.
I mean, Eric, in one of his pieces, he talks about how samurais conquered the fear of death. They just accepted it could happen. They thought about it all the time. They're like, all right, I could die.
Hmm.
And they resolved themselves to that. And so that's another way. Like, yeah, it could happen. I mean, it could happen. And then actually kind of a third way that I use sometimes is, in point of fact, all of my problems are first world problems.
So true. That's a good reminder. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I remember getting upset because there was a business associate that I really don't like, and I was having trouble coming up with the right negotiation strategy to deal with this person. And I remember stopping myself in the middle of thinking about it, and I thought, you know what? The only reason they're hounding us is because we rock. I mean, our negotiation strategy is revolutionary. It's not evolutionary, it's revolutionary. And that's why they're hounding us, because we're just so darn good. So, in point of fact, I'm lucky to be in this conversation at all. And as soon as I said that to myself, my head cleared up and I came up with the negotiation strategy I needed. And then I went on to something else.
Yeah. No, I love that. First world problems.
The gratitude hack, right?
Yeah, right. And you talking about, I mean, if you want to touch on your business here, saying your technique is revolutionary, what do you think makes you and your business stand out from everybody else?
Well, nobody has approached it with a systematized application of emotional intelligence to this degree. Now, Jim Camp started a little bit with the book that he wrote, Start With No, back in 2002. And we still collaborate with Jim's son, Todd Camp. Jim has since passed on. And we were on the phone with Todd just 2 days ago. But every book prior to that, Getting to Yes, is an intellectually sound, rational book. And unfortunately, human beings are not intellectually sound and rational.
You are right.
Yeah, so I mean, how are you gonna, that's like an operating system. That's like trying to get a Mac operating system to work on a PC. Just ain't gonna happen.
Right. Yeah.
We're creative, we're instinctive, we're driven by what we care about. Even sociopaths are driven by what they care about.
Hmm.
So what we did was take hostage negotiation, something that we thought was only for crazy people, and we said, hey, crazy is a matter of degree. Let's drop this emotional intelligence, this military grade emotional intelligence, and let's drop it in the business world. And nobody else took that leap. And that's why it's not evolutionary is when you get to the next level. Revolutionary is when you bring bow and arrows and the other side a bunch of knights in shining armor that got lances and swords,
Yeah. You're redefining
and
the
you kill
category.
them from 1,000 yards away, and they don't
Right.
even get close enough to you to hit you with the lances and swords.
Yeah.
That's revolutionary.
And something there that you said humans are creative, that's a topic that comes up again and again on this show. And another one is curiosity. And then another one would be collaboration. And
Yeah,
something you said in your
yeah,
book about collaboration really made me stop. I even underlined it as I was reading it. And you say that negotiation is the heart of collaboration. And
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
really intrigued me. Do you want to expound on that maybe? Why do you think that is?
Well, how we view negotiation to start with.
Yeah.
We view negotiation as mutual problem solving, information gathering, application of influence, mutual figuring out what the influence points are. We don't even use the term leverage. We think in terms of influence.
Hmm.
And
I like that.
the adversary is a situation. What does that mean? You and somebody else are faced with different aspects of the same problem, and you're trying to collaborate to alleviate both of your pain.
Hmm.
So it requires a collaboration. And so we don't look at negotiation as win-lose unless you're trying to make the situation lose, unless you're trying to achieve victory over the situation, which
Hmm.
shifts the opponent away from being your counterpart.
Right. Okay.
And so we got to collaborate to work this out.
I like how you identified that it's not always win or lose in negotiation. Kind of talking on that same subject, and I want to dive into your book a little deeper now because there were so many things that you said in it that just really popped out at me, and we won't have near enough time to get to all of it, but that'll get listeners to go buy a copy. Everybody needs to definitely go buy this book, Never Split the Difference. But kind of going along with the title, in the book, you say that a successful hostage negotiator has to get everything he asks for without giving anything back of substance and do so in a way that leaves the adversaries feeling as if they have a great relationship. And underline that as well. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things in this book, mainly because I haven't studied negotiation, and someone like you who has been in it for so long and an expert in the field to write a book is really helpful. Applying it to business, is where we're coming from, my listeners, myself. But my
Cool.
question to you on that is that how negotiation should play out in business too? Or is it all about the person's goal, going back to what you just said? Or should that always be the goal? And then it almost seemed like you alluded to compromise is a dirty word. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But is there any place where compromise should fit in, or should it be forgotten altogether? That's a loaded question, but take your time on that.
All right, kind of three parts,
Yeah.
if you will. I'll try to hit each one of them.
Okay.
Uh, our goal needs to be, regardless of the outcome, to have maintained a great relationship.
Okay.
Because the reality is, there's no such thing as a one-off. If we're talking to people, we're going to talk to them again.
Hmm.
And how things went last time, we're going to see how things are going to go next time. I mean, if you are a sociopath, you want great relationships because you're smart enough to know that when people are mad at you, they start ganging up on you and they start trying to pay you back, and they want to pay you back, as they say, in spades. I mean, it's human nature that we got to pay back at least at twice the rate that we were hurt in order to feel even.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's why compromise becomes a vicious spiral, because unfortunately, as human beings, a loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain. Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics for making that observation.
Hmm.
So if I want to compromise with you and I was like, all right, I'm going to give a little. Let's say I give the equivalent of $5. You're not going to think that much about that $5 because you gained it. It wasn't a loss for you. However, I'm going to sting. I'm going to feel like I gave up 10. So I'm not going to feel even with you until I get at least $10 back when I only gave 5. Now suddenly I take 10 out of your hide in exchange for 5. Now you feel shorted. And you're not going to feel okay until you get back double that 20. And that's how this becomes this vicious spiral to start with. I mean, let's pretend like just on sheer back and forth that we want to try to do okay with, exchange of value on this. That as human beings, it just doesn't add up. We're not, because of our caveman wiring, a loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain. And it's actually even worse than that, because Professor Kahneman, I like to say Danny Kahneman, I feel like familiarity with him, even though I've never met him. But Danny Kahneman gives an interview where he says, he and his partner Amos said, you know what? It's not twice as much. It's actually 5 to 7 times as much. But Amos and I lowered the number to 2 because we didn't want as many arguments from our colleagues.
Wow.
So again, that begins to show you this vicious spiral. That's just in terms of a straight trying to go back and forth on a give and take. You can't do it and feel okay about it. And if you don't feel okay about it, what are you going to do the next time? Now let's say, well, let's compromise on ideas. I'm not completely sure I'm okay with your idea, so let me blend ideas with you. That always backfires because it's like diluting a formula. Like, I don't know if I want to use kerosene or gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever you're trying to blend. So let's water them down and see how that works. I had, one of our great tactics to restart conversations is, have you given up on this project? One line email, one line text message. Have you given up on working with the Black Swan Group? Have you given up on solving this problem? Send that and nothing more. I mean, I'm telling you word for word. You get an answer in 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow.
So I'm in a training session. I'm in a keynote, and this young lady walks up to me. She says, I tried your "Have you given up on" technique, and it didn't work. And I'm like, all right, interesting. There might be one in a million where it didn't work. Tell me exactly what you said. I need to know word for word. And she said, yeah, well, I wasn't completely comfortable with the wording you chose, so I blended in a little of mine. And instead of saying, have you given up on this project, I sent a text that said, should we give up on having lunch together to discuss the project?
Totally different.
Yes, she
Yeah.
said, because she said, I feel that you is kind of accusatory, so I want to be more inclusive. So I put we instead of you. And I didn't want to really corner them on the project, and I've been trying to get them to go to lunch, and they don't want to go to lunch. So I said, should we? And I thought, Jesus, no wonder it doesn't work. The other side looked at that. They didn't know how to react.
Right.
They were both confused, and at the same time, they've already communicated to you they don't want to go to lunch. So that's why they ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
So she compromised on her ideas and my ideas and got nothing, and then came back to me and said, well, your idea doesn't work.
Yes, it does.
Yes, that is not what happened.
Right. That is not what you said. I like that a lot, and that's a such a practical tip we can start using because people don't like giving up on anything. That's like a prove me wrong type thing, and you get people to opt in that way. That's really good. I'm going to start using that myself. Thanks.
And it's also a completely safe answer
Yeah.
because I can say no to that without feeling like there's an implied commitment. And that's one of the key differences between why we don't bother with yes. Because if you send a message that says, are you still interested in a project? The other person's going to feel like if they say yes to that, a hook has been sunk in them.
It's true.
And so if you get an answer at all, you're going to get silence. You're going to get maybe, just guarded. Or what you're going to get is you're going to get the counterfeit yes, which people get really good at coming up with. They're going to say, yes, they're not interested, but what they're trying to do is pump you for information.
That's really good. And for a people pleaser, recovering people pleaser like myself, it's it's hard to say no. So I that yes is easy to say. Something else talking about negotiation that really,
Adam,
yeah.
did you go to your People Pleasers Anonymous meeting this week?
I did. For the past year or so, I'm getting better at that. And that's something I've written about before, and my audience knows about that, and that's just something that I constantly deal with.
Hey, we've all got something like that, right?
Yeah, and that feeling of letting people down. And maybe that's why I enjoyed your book so much, is it talked a bit about that,
All right, very good, man.
And because you talking about compromise almost being a dirty word, or maybe that's not what you meant.
I didn't quite say it that strong, but I can give you lots of examples of why compromise destroyed stuff. And you're going to be hard pressed, anybody's hard pressed to come up with an example of compromise where when it was over, everybody went, that was awesome.
Right. Yeah, at the end, people are like, okay, let's move on, if anything, right? I mean,
Exactly.
nobody's excited. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And talking more about negotiation and something that I wanted to ask you about just from reading it, you say that great negotiators aim to use their skills to reveal the surprises that they are certain exist. And so, through that lens, I was trying to put myself in that place of a negotiator. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the lens to view that through Would it be more of a skeptical lens that you need to view the world through, or more of a negative, or would you not describe it that way at all?
No, it's a really interesting point. It helps me a lot to understand how some people will react to that. So, no, it's not negative. It's not negative in any way, shape, or form. We like to say, ignore human nature at your peril. And
Yeah.
the human nature is the other side's got stuff that they're scared to tell us
Mm.
or that they're scared to share. In any given negotiation, you're going to approach the interaction with hidden cards, if you will, like how much you want something or what's driving you to want it. The kind of stuff that if you feel like that if you just revealed it would give the other side all the leverage in the world.
Okay.
If they knew my deadlines, if they knew my pressures, if they knew what's really eating in me, if they knew my pain, there's a lot of discussion of pain in the business world. It's, we ask people over and over, are you ever in a negotiation where you don't have some hidden cards, information you're holding close to the vest? And we let people think about it, and we don't get anybody that ever raises their hand and says, you know what, I'm in negotiations all the time when I'm hiding nothing. It just doesn't happen.
Sure.
All right, so you've got stuff that's closely held always, so that means the other side does too.
Okay. Yeah.
So not only is there closely held stuff, but where the black swans are is, by definition, we don't know what's in the overlap.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's a little bit of an intellectual exercise to see two steps ahead like that. But you're not hiding stuff from me because you're a bad person. You're hiding stuff from me because you're afraid of being taken advantage of. You're a little bit fear driven.
Mm. Yeah.
Maybe I'm not hiding stuff from you on purpose, but
Mm-hmm.
either I forgot or I just don't feel like telling you. But then we kind of get into an area where you're going to go like, wow, I had no idea that was important to you. My assessment of the situation, how would I know that was important to you? I don't know everything about you. I'm not Mr. Wizard. I'm not a clairvoyant. There's a pretty good chance that there's something that you're sitting on over there that you think isn't all that valuable. If you knew everything about me, you see how that would be perfect for me. And that's why we got to get into this collaborative mindset. And I'm going to get you into a collaborative mindset with my emotional intelligence approach.
And so part of all that approach is, a few key words that I read were empathy and listening, and you talking about at the beginning that it's all about creating relationships because we're going to talk again. And would you say that those are the main things that, because you care about other people and you're empathetic and you're listening, those are the main ingredients of this approach, would you say?
All right. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so do you have to care about other people to be empathetic? Because if empathy is the key to your approach, what happens when you don't care about the other person at all?
Good point. Good
So
point.
we got to take caring out of the empathy definition.
Okay.
And that's really hard for a lot of people because it's such a popular word these days. You got to have empathy. You got to care about people, or you're a bad person. And maybe you don't care, but even admit you don't care, you're automatically a bad person. So the hostage negotiator's definition of empathy, the Harvard negotiator's definition of empathy is exactly the same. Like, caring is not an element, understanding is. And that's a tough distinction. Understanding doesn't equate to agreement. And if you can totally understand the other side, then you can have empathy. To me, that's easy because that was my opening premise. As a hostage negotiator, I had to assume that there was going to be somebody on the other side of the phone that I would have nothing in common with and whose values I would completely reject. And I'm like, all right, I can negotiate with that person, which gives me the freedom and the ability to have influence on everybody.
Yeah.
If I need to accept your values, if I need to like you, if I need to agree with you, if we need to have some sort of synergy automatically, now I'm just starting cutting off bigger portions of the planet that I can't negotiate with.
Out of everything that we've talked about, that probably challenges me the most because I've
Yeah,
always associated caring with empathy. Do you get
yeah.
that question often? Do you talk about that often? Because I don't know if I've
Everybody,
ever.
I
Yeah.
had to struggle with it in the first place, and I had to learn it. Everybody does,
Okay.
one way or another. Getting over that hurdle is one of the things where you start getting on the other side of the bell curve and you start leaving other people behind and you start getting competitive advantages in who you can negotiate and the really cool deals that you can make.
That's really good. You've got me thinking quite a bit. Your book did, and our conversation is as well. So this is great. Um,
Thank you very much.
yeah, kind of wrapping up here, getting towards the end, but I wanted to also ask you while I've got you here, do you think that there are natural born negotiators, or is it something that can be learned by everyone? I mean, kind of, you said, people are more fear driven. People maybe are more positive than others. Maybe people want to believe the good in everybody and that nobody is hiding anything from them. I mean, what would you tell those people who don't feel like they're maybe a good negotiator, that you have to start somewhere and it'll become better with practice, or is there more to it than that?
Well, first of all, if you don't feel like you're a good negotiator, you probably have more ability to get better than a person who says, I'm a good negotiator. Because if you say, I'm a good negotiator, that means your mind is closed. And we find those people are very hard to teach and they got some real bad habits.
Hmm.
So, first of all, if you're saying to yourself, I'm not a good negotiator, you are in possession of the first necessary skill, which is you're open to learning. And openness is actually one of the quickest and most highly correlated traits to improving your negotiation skills.
Okay.
So, short answer, we divide the planet pretty much up from the caveman days into three types: fight, flight, make friends. Those were the cavemen that survived, and those are inherent in our DNA. Now, you need attributes of all three types. So, whoever you are, whichever your natural born type is, there are parts about you that are unique that are needed for great negotiations. You don't possess them all, but you already were born with some of them. The complementary skills that we got to add to what you've already got are dependent upon which group you're in, are going to vary slightly, but you've already got some of the attributes. So it's not necessarily a matter of getting rid of what you do well, but it's figuring out the combination of complementary skills to who you are to take you to the next level.
Because I wouldn't necessarily call myself a good negotiator, and maybe that's why your book intrigued me so much too. And I'm sure there's listeners out there who would say the same thing. But I like that open-mindedness is the key to learning. And once you believe that you know everything, then you know nothing.
Yeah, and plus you're not learning.
Yeah. The key is to continually grow and try to become better.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, what a great conversation today. I've got two last questions for you. And the first one is, if there's one last piece of advice that you'd like to leave listeners with, it could be about negotiation, it could be about something else, it could be something we've already touched on that you just want to highlight here. But if you could leave listeners with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Take the time to hear the other side out first. I mean, you'll be shocked at what appears to be a waste of time, how much time it actually saves.
Hmm.
There's an old phrase, a stitch in time saves nine. What behaviors can you engage in the beginning that overall not just save a little time, but there's a massive return on investment on what you did at the beginning. And hearing the other side out is one of those things that the rate of return overall is anywhere from 7 to 9 to 1. Because the other side ain't going to stop talking until they feel like they've been heard. So the sooner they feel heard out, the sooner they shut up.
That is such an important reminder because, I mean, I'm sure you're guilty of it. I know I am, is we all get in a hurry
Yeah,
and we look for the quickest answer. But what
yeah,
you're saying is usually the quickest answer is not very helpful. It's a shortcut, if you will.
yeah.
And shortcuts are hardly ever the way to go. Wow, that's another point to really think about. And so, thank you again, Chris, for coming on the show. Again, a great book. Everybody needs to pick it up. But one last question for you. Where would you like to send people to find out more about you and your work?
All right, the gateway to everything we do is our newsletter. It's complimentary, so it's free. And a colleague that used to like to say, if it's free, I'll take three. So
Yes.
the newsletter's free. The best, easiest way to sign up is a text to sign up function. If you make it all one word, FBI empathy, your autocorrect is going to try to make it two words. Send a text message, FBI Empathy, all one word, to the number 22828. And that's 22828. You'll get a response back that'll ask you for your email address. The newsletter comes out Tuesday mornings. It's short and sweet. It's a great supplement to the book. Plus, it's the gateway to our website. It's a gateway to free training. There are training announcements in there. It's a gateway to everything we do. So sign up for the newsletter. It's called The Edge. It's the gateway to everything. We got a lot of free stuff. We got stuff we charge for. But the best first step, besides buying a book on Amazon, because that's where I buy it, because it's always the best price, is sign up for the newsletter.
Awesome. I'm going to go sign up for it now. I got the book, but I'm not signed up yet, so I'll sign up for the newsletter.
Cool.
And awesome conversation. And again, I appreciate your time today.
Pleasure was mine, man. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you got something out of these ideas. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.